I'm not pro-Russia, I'm not pro-Ukraine, I'm not pro-America, I'm pro-humanity. I know deep down that what I'm trying to do is help vulnerable populations get out of the circumstances that they're in and make sure that they are in a healthy, safe environment.
That's Mikhail Mikhaylov, a senior at the University of Florida. He's Russian-American, but he spent the last year and a half founding and leading a nonprofit that sends aid to Ukraine. He even worked with the mayor of Gainesville to establish a sister city relationship with Nizhyn in northern Ukraine. This week, we're talking about universal healthcare, affordable housing, and whether it's okay to name your kids after yourself here on What is America? Week 9, and I just wrapped up my last week in Florida. It was already going to be a great week, and then my partner Brian came to visit, so it was like 10,000 times better. We took a walk around Old St. Augustine. We went to one of those legendary Florida gift shops where you can buy literally anything. I'm talking flip-flops, squirt guns, sunscreen, beach towels, seashells, even a keychain with your name on it. We also went kayaking in one of Florida's world-famous artesian springs. Were there gators? Yes, there were. Did I make friends with one? You bet I did. Bienvenidos. I'm John, and this is What is America? It's a podcast in which I drive all over the country and talk to people about their lives. Together, we're figuring out the news story of America, who we are, what we stand for, and what we're building toward as a nation. I just got to Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I'll be for the next month, and then I'm off to Detroit. To learn more about our itinerary and stay connected, visit our website, whatisamericapodcast.com. Okay, story time. You remember that 6-foot-long alligator who wandered out of the swamp and into the first floor hallway of my apartment building in Gainesville? That story is 100% true, by the way. Well, I like to think of this podcast as a big family, you know? Like, once you're in, you're in. So I thought we should check in on her, right? Like, getting lost and finding yourself in an unfamiliar situation, that's a stressful experience. Fortunately, Brian and I were able to reconnect with her while we were kayaking in Silver Springs, about 40 miles south of Gainesville. Her name is Renee. She's 26 years old. When I asked her what happened that night, she said it was a confusing time in her life. She was recently out of a difficult relationship. She's passionate about walkable neighborhoods, and she just kind of got carried away. Fortunately, things have settled down a lot since then. She found a new apartment. She got a job as a spin instructor at SoulCycle. She's even starting to think about dating again, although she's taking things one day at a time. Best of luck, Renee. And for everybody else, I'll keep you posted. Okay, let's talk about the interview. Mikhail Mikhaylov moved to Orlando from St. Petersburg in Russia at age 5. His parents were physicists who immigrated to work at the University of Central Florida. Just imagine, you're 5 years old, you don't speak any English, and then Florida. Mikhail says it wasn't the easiest transition. Initially, at least, he didn't love the food, and he kept telling the other kids on the playground to speak correctly. In Russian, of course. But over time, he's learned to love his new home. He says that, at its best, America is a uniquely free place where people can achieve their highest potential. In terms of achieving his own highest potential, Mikhail is no slouch. He's a senior at the University of Florida, getting ready to graduate later this summer. In addition to his demanding coursework, he's also a co-founder and president of URI, the Ukraine Rebuilding Initiative. It's a group of about 40 undergraduates who are working to heal and rebuild the city of Nizhyn in northern Ukraine. To be precise, they're helping with things like building bomb shelters at bus stops and obtaining prosthetic limbs for Ukrainian veterans who've been injured in the war. Mikhail even worked closely with Gainesville Mayor Henry Ward to establish a sister city relationship with Nizhyn. Just curious, what were you doing in your senior year of college? I asked Mikhail if he feels a tension between his identity as a Russian American and his work sending aid to Ukraine. I'll be honest, his answer really impressed me. I played it at the top of the show. He said, "I'm not pro-Russia and I'm not pro-Ukraine. I'm pro-humanity. Deep down, what we're trying to do is help vulnerable people get to a safe place." Fellow travelers, the kids are all right. I hope you enjoy this week's interview, because I sure did. Okay, for this part only, please look right in the lens and introduce yourself like you would introduce yourself to a new friend.
Of course, my name is Mikhail Mikhaylov, born in Russia, but I would say I'm an American studying international studies and poli-sci right now at the University of Florida.
And you're going to graduate soon?
Yes, soon to graduate this summer.
Okay, and are you planning a celebration?
I don't know, but potentially that is the tradition usually to celebrate it. But for me, that's kind of just, graduation is just the standard of something greater.
Okay. Wow. Ambitious. So do you have any, tell me about your memories of St. Petersburg. Like, what's something you remember from when you were like 4 or 5?
Oh, great question. Obviously, familiar foods. I think grandma cooking, mother cooking, but also playing at the playgrounds. We had a kind of a preschool, pre-kindergarten, program that I was a part of that I remember specifically being on a playground, building things out of snow, out of sand, things of that nature. The sand boxes were a big thing that unfortunately you don't see quite often here in Florida.
Yeah. I think... So we had sandboxes growing up, but they weren't very clean. A lot of cats would poop in them.
Yeah. I think the ones there were a little bit better.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. And what would your grandma cook?
Oh, she would make traditional foods. Borscht, for example, is a beet soup. Not a lot of Americans are attracted to the concept of beets, but I think I definitely sense a lot of desire to get more borscht on a daily basis, if possible. Then we have pelmeni, which are concepts that are like dumplings, essentially, Russian dumplings.
Do you make your own?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Last Thanksgiving, we had pelmeni.
Really?
Yeah,
impressive.
So Vadim made them, my college roommate.
That's amazing. Vadim knows his stuff then.
Yeah. So, okay. Florida is a lot different from St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
When you got here, did you speak English?
No, I did not. I was kind of too young to kind of delve into the I guess Russian curriculum that kind of allows you to learn English simultaneous to Russian grammar and etc. So coming here, I had basically mother tongue Russian, no English. I think only my father at the time spoke English. So it was this strange thing where I would be thrown on my playground, for example, and I had to like interact with children that spoke a language that I completely didn't understand. And I think a fond memory, or at least a memory that my parents have told me about, was me trying to pick up a kid and say, speak normally when they were speaking English. And it felt very like
poor kid.
Yeah, very poor kid, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's doing all right.
Yeah.
But now I've kind of learn the beauty of American cultures and then the English language. And I think
had you heard of America before you came here?
I think faint things as much as a 5 or younger person would know. Obviously, there was a early memory as well when I was on a plane flying to America, and I tried the sandwich on the plane, and it was not very good. And I thought it was akin to
what was the sandwich?
It was some cheese sandwich,
okay.
grilled cheese maybe, something like this. And I thought it was akin to all cuisine in America. So I remember crying to my dad saying, "I hate American food." And my father was like, "Don't worry, you'll find new things to hate." Or something like this. Yeah. It was quite hilarious.
Mm-hmm. And you've got your citizenship as well.
Yes, I got my citizenship freshman year of college.
Wow. How did that feel?
For some reason, like there are things that you fight for, like for example, graduation, like you mentioned, or the citizenship. But once you actually get it, it feels like just the standard as what you should have gotten, or I guess it's not really an accomplishment. It's just another step in a ladder towards whether it's career or academic or personal growth. So I think that's kind of something that could be an unfortunate way of looking at life, but that's...
I was going to say, what's worth celebrating?
I guess I don't
Or is
know.
everything just another step?
Potentially. Obviously, I think this is something I have to work on myself, but recognizing successes and making sure I do celebrate those moments. And I think that goes into a lot of work culture and mentality that is present here in the United States.
Yeah, workaholism.
Workaholism, yeah.
Does that sound like you?
I think so.
Yeah, I've seen your resume. I think maybe.
I think, well,
Yeah. All right. If I asked your friends about you, if I were like, describe Mikhail to me, what would they say?
I think it depends on which friend. You know, I have a different personality for each group, or at least I try to be adaptive. But I think the overall consensus would be hopefully hardworking, attempts to actually hear people out, and has somewhat of a high caliber of empathy, I suppose. I hope that is true. At least I try to stream for those three qualities.
Yeah, those are good things to aspire to. Are you a person of faith?
I am not. Raised atheist. Grandparents were very strong Eastern Orthodox. Parents were atheist. Myself, agnostic.
And yet, I perceive you to be a person of values.
Of course.
So tell me, what are your values and where do you get them?
Biggest value, I think, on paper is if I am ever in a room, I leave it better than I found it. That's my biggest value. And I think to be a person who is good, one must have empathy. One must try to understand what another person has lived through and why they made the choices that they do, or why they made the choices that they did, and why they continue to make the choices that they continue to do. I think there's a lot of value in being a person of empathy, because I think for me, if I ever had to, as I progress in my professional or academic career, the easiest way for me to track intelligence has been empathy. How empathetic someone is. Of course, that's not the full definition of intelligence. To me, there's multifaceted, but that's the easiest way to measure it for me.
So you derive your values by understanding someone's point of view, putting yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, of course. I try my best to do this, and I think it's most evident with how involved I try to be. For example, here at the University of Florida, I try to go as many organizations as possible, to the Russian Culture Club, Ukrainian Student Association, Hungarian, Baltic student associations. We even have the Pakistan Student Association, African Student Union, the Arab community. For
and
example.
you go to the African and the Arab Student Union?
Of course. Why not? I think for a student like who goes to the University of Florida, with a university that has over 50,000 students and 500,000 alumni, why not take advantage of the resources and the diverse, amazing, beautiful cultures that are present in our community? I have a lot of sympathy for and potentially empathy for those that are stuck in one identity, one faith, one belief system, one, perspective on life. I want to challenge myself because I think I am a global citizen.
Exciting. So, okay, you don't watch a lot of TV. Any shows that you do watch?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I utilized Friends and The Office as kind of resources to actually enhance my English to some extent. So a lot of my comedy maybe is even derived from such shows. I always was a big fan of Michael Scott's humor, also Chandler Bing's sarcasm, for example. Those characters were very big representatives to the culture of America, at least through my eyes.
Nice. Have you been dating?
Have I been dating? You know, it's a good question. Being a workaholic and dating usually don't go hand in hand. But, you know, I try to entertain that notion.
From time to time?
From time to time, yeah.
Anybody now?
Not at the moment. You know, I'm a free man.
Okay. All right. Take note. What's something that you're proud of accomplishing?
That's a good question. So one of the things I've done here at the University of Florida is co-founded an organization by the name of Ukraine Rebuilding Initiative. And what we have done is created a sister city alliance between the city of Gainesville and the city of Nizhyn in Ukraine, and infused it with different projects like anti-bomb shelter construction at bus stops for students, prosthesis development for veteran amputees, culture exchange programs between our university entities, things of this nature. And I think, obviously, I could say I've accomplished, I think, a lot of things with numerical numbers, but I think the biggest takeaway from that experience was actually establishing a precedent that a student like myself, who's an undergrad, can do things like this, can agglomerate all of these experiences and connections I've made throughout my early on career and actually create a student-led, student-built initiative.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we're going to dive into that in just a bit.
Course.
What's something you've been feeling grateful for?
Of course, parents have to shout out my mother and father. I think they've given me the most important thing, which is a last name and a brute grit to push forward.
Wow.
So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, beautiful. And then if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
Interesting. I think for me, biggest superpower would probably be something like food duplication. I'll go to some kind of community that needs food and give everyone as much as possible.
Altruistic superpower.
I think so. I mean, I feel like a superpower like flying and super strength obviously is very, very awesome. But if I had to tackle something directly, it would be probably world hunger, because then everything would just everything that we understand about the world and economics would just be turned up on its head.
I wonder how much food or how much money it would take to end hunger in the world, because it seems doable.
I think there are so many, academics and scholars who have given numbers that we can solve world hunger already. It's just about the proper distribution of it. And unfortunately, we have not come to a consensus of what that looks like right now. And I think that's why all of these issues are happening, is because we aren't able to actually distribute properly.
It's like if you chose to make that your life path, you could actually have this superpower. You could actually,
essentially,
yeah,
of course. I think many potentially have the ability already to take that superpower. It's now a question of do they take that mantle of accomplishment and try to achieve that.
Yeah. So you're about to graduate.
Yes.
What's your major?
I'm majoring in international studies and poli-sci, but minoring also in economics, public health, and Russian, with certificates in medical geography and AI implementation.
Whoa.
A lot, yeah. It's a lot of words, but I promise it's actually a lot simpler on paper of classes.
So what unites all of it?
Diplomacy.
Diplomacy.
Of course,
and even including the AI stuff.
Of course. I think the future is AI-driven, or at least if we look at any field, AI implementation is so ubiquitously implemented, or integrated. So I think having that at least as a certificate, or at least as a fundamental understanding of it, is very, very important.
And you're 23.
Yes, sir.
And at 23, many people do not know what path they want to take their career. Do you have any idea?
I think I have plans A through E after graduation. I won't bore you with what those are, but a lot of priority is set on making sure that I either get a position in the government, I get a position in somewhere in the EU, somewhere in the United Nations. That's obviously a dream goal of mine, to work on international law or international humanitarian efforts. But if all of that fails, I also have as much time then to commit to the nonprofit that I was able to establish and the work that I've already been building up towards.
It excites me that you want to work in government. And what draws you to that? I think
government work is kind of a safety net to some extent. Well, I mean, if I were speaking about, for example, State Department, or when by State Department I mean the U.S. State Department, or Department of Defense, or the Department of Health and Human Services, things like this. I think for me, I've already worked in these entities before as an intern or as a research analyst, and I have connections I've already established that I could try to leverage to actually get an actual role and position. Obviously, there's a lot of distaste, especially right now, for government work and what the government represents, etc. But for me, I've witnessed already how much good I could do and how much assistance I could provide to good people. Might as well go and commit to it, even if the entity as a whole may be in a very controversial, tricky position right now.
I mean, it seems like what excites you is doing this work, right? And if you were going to try to crystallize that, like, what's the work that you're excited to do in the world?
I think that's a good question. If I had to summarize it or crystallize it, like you say, in like one sentence or two, it's making sure that people reach their potential in life. People themselves have a healthy I guess, background, or we live in a more just world. I think that's something that I think I strive for, and that's the most diluted version of anything that I try to do, and a common theme I think in all of the type of work that I try to do.
Hey, me again. Okay, I've got a joke. What separates a good football team from a great football team? Give up? The Florida-Georgia border. Ooh. Okay, a friend told me that joke, and I don't actually know what it means, but I assume it's very offensive. So, first of all, if you are a sports person and can explain that joke to me, would you please write in? I'm whatisamericapodcast@gmail.com. Second of all, while I gotcha, would you mind smashing that like button? This podcast is just getting off the ground, and your validation really matters. Heck, while you're here, you could even leave me a comment or subscribe to my channel. Okay, back to the interview. So you've been very busy.
I think so, yeah.
And something that you've done, which I think is really interesting, is start the Ukraine Rebuilding Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And I was moved because you are Russian American,
Mm-hmm.
and this is Ukraine. And I think many people would feel a tension,
Of course.
between those two identities. And can you just tell me more about that?
Of course, and yeah, it's very tricky because obviously, my family is Russian. Obviously, my heritage. If you go back to my ancestry, for example, there is a little bit of Ukrainian there, but I don't think if I go to Ukraine, they will take me as such. Especially since I'm a Russian-speaking American, my Ukrainian is quite limited. So I wouldn't be accepted as a Russian American Ukrainian. I'll just simply be either a Russian or a Russian American. But going back to your main principle about like what's that story of why I even started the Ukraine Rebuilding Initiative. Myself, I'm not pro-Russia, I'm not pro-Ukraine, I'm not pro-America, I'm pro-humanity, right? And if there's an avenue I can take that makes it seem that I may be more tailored to one side, then that's external interpretation, and I'll allow people to think what they want to believe. But myself, I know deep down that what I'm trying to do is help vulnerable populations get out of the circumstances that they're in and make sure that they are in a healthy, safe environment that is just. And if that means doing something for Ukraine, if that means doing something for Russia, if that means doing something for America, that is what I'm going to try to do.
Talk about the work that Yuri is doing.
So, kind of previously mentioned, we've created a sister city alliance between our city of Gainesville. I've worked really closely with Mayor Ward, our mayor here in Gainesville, to build rapport, to make sure that I'm leveraging those connections. And the city of Nizhyn in Ukraine, I met the mayor when I was actually interning with the State Department up in DC. With the Bureau of Energy Resources. And we got to talking about my experience with the city of Gainesville and then my ambitions to try to help those in Ukraine potentially or the victims of the conflict. And we got to talking. We were like, let's create a sister city. That's exactly what we did. And ever since, actually a year or 3 days before the 1-year anniversary of me meeting Mayor Kodola, we actually had the memorandum of understanding legal document signed by both mayors, saying that we've established this as a sister city. It's official. It was amazing to see our organization logo on this legal document, our words on this document.
So that took 3 years to make that happen. 1 year.
1 year.
Okay.
It was a year, 3 days before the 1-year anniversary. So technically 363 days if you take in leap year. So technically that around a little over 300 days to actually create that legal document. But that was just the start. The legal document was just a symbolic gesture to indicate that we're there to support or that we have a population that wants to assist. What we did after, I think, is the meat of the project and the initiative itself. We have a civil engineering team that's working on anti-bomb shelter constructions at bus stops. We have a prosthetics team that is creating a prosthesis for a veteran amputee. We have a public health division that's trying to create medical packages and nutrition-based packages that we can send to hospitals and orphanages there. We have a cultural affairs division that's created as kind of another memorandum of understanding between our international center and their Nizhyn Global State University. And lastly, we have an agricultural division that's working to create research with IFAS and other farming or farmers in Nizhyn and in that region.
And these are all student volunteers?
All student-led by... Yes.
How many students?
It depends. Each division has their own, but if I had to give a number, as a total agglomerated number, around 35 to 40 students.
And you recruited them over the course of the year?
Yes, over the course of the year.
Is it your friends, or how'd you...
Started with friends, obviously. Started with people that were close, whether it be through previous culture organizations that I tried to visit, or it was more technical, for example, through classes or through engineering teams, etc. It was recruitment through that. And the reason I say co-founder is because a lot of my friends, maybe 5 or 6 of them, were the founding fathers to some extent of the organization with me. Okay. So a lot of gratitude goes towards to them. For that assistance. But yeah, starts as friends, then we collectively, slowly but gradually built up our team.
Wow. I can see why you're proud of that. Yeah. You also volunteered with the mental health hotline.
Yes.
And that is powerful work. Mm-hmm. It's not easy.
Unfortunately not.
Talk about your experience.
Yes, so it required a lot of training to actually just even pick up phones. And I think the training was very enriching, and that I think I still utilize to this day. Technical skills like active listening or paraphrasing to make sure that the person feels heard. These skill sets were not the easiest to acquire because it's not the most natural way of speaking. So that was definitely a challenge, but I think I learned a lot after 60 plus hours of learning or getting taught. They actually gave us a lot of opportunities to actually model and simulate calls. We took online courses with the 988 Lifeline training program, all agglomerated to actually sitting down, answering calls. I think I answered around 200 calls to this day. Very intense. 70% of the calls are just people who are lonely, maybe elderly people who just have no one to speak with. Maybe the other 30 are a little bit more intense, people who have unfortunately put themselves in quite difficult predicaments, or are very worried about a friend who may be in a very suicidal circumstance. So,
what did you learn about people?
I think it definitely was eye-opening to see how frequent callers are. I think we receive maybe 30,000 calls each year, and it's just a local community center. So I can't imagine the 988 programs that are statewide or federal-wide are available to a larger regions. So it's a lot of things.
You heard a stat.
Please.
They asked people, how many close friends do you have?
Mm-hmm.
And 10% of women and 15% of men said they don't have any close friends at all. And that's about 5 times more people who said that than did in the 90s. So there's something going on. There's there's an isolation thing happening.
Of course. And it's strange because it's like a paradox, because you'd think that the internet is getting us closer to one another. But unfortunately, once again, paradoxically, we're seeing this increase of loneliness in our population.
So I've heard that University of Florida is a fun place to go to school.
Yes, of course.
Have you had time to have any fun?
I think so. I definitely witnessed our basketball team winning the nationals. I think that was very interesting. I'm someone who doesn't really understand the complete hype of it to some extent, because people were in the streets, flooding the streets after the win, and my first question was, what did you contribute to? I was not that amped up because I didn't feel like I technically won. I felt like the university akin to all the students, or the students akin to the university, and there is some sense of pride, but to some extent, I don't really sense pride when I haven't done anything to deserve it. So that's why it's a little bit of a dichotomy for me when it comes to that stuff. But fun, yes, I think so. I've been participated.
So, fun. What does fun look like for you?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think seeing results of work is always fun.
Super fun. When was the last time you had fun?
I think this is fun.
This is fun. Right, this is fun. Have you ever been to a party?
I've been to parties, yes. But to be honest, the parties are there to network for me. You know? Even if I'm there as to have fun, I always see it as an opportunity to meet new people and potentially make new connections.
Do you think you take yourself too seriously?
Maybe. But I think I'm a quite fun, relaxed guy when necessary.
Yeah.
But, for example, I love playing volleyball. I also play volleyball with a lot of my peers and friends. If, for example, I'm good friends with the Colombian Student Association here. So they have a lot of activities that are like modeling the Olympics and soccer, for example, volleyball. But also the Arab Student Association also has a lot of events with soccer tournaments. I participate in those.
Okay.
So our sports are always a way to entertain oneself and have fun.
Do you have any friends who know how to loosen you up?
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe not enough. Maybe not enough yet.
Do you think your life has a purpose?
Oh, well, not to go existential. I'm not sure. Maybe. I think whenever that question is asked, it's because people may be lost. And I think that question sometimes does more harm, where it puts themselves in a position of I need a purpose. And right now, I don't think there is really a true purpose for people that isn't artificial or man-made. You kind of assign your own purpose as you grow through life. And I think my purpose that I've assigned to myself right now is to make sure that I'm making people reach their potential with a healthy, just, safe life.
That's a very thoughtful answer.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying we'll only know in retrospect what the purpose of our life has been.
Sure, yeah.
And in the meantime, all we can do is kind of provisionally guess at it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to have kids?
Oh, I would love to have kids. Yeah,
okay.
I think so. I would love to have 2 biological children and then 1 adopted potentially.
Have you named them?
No, I haven't named them just yet. I feel like I want to leave that off to my partner potentially, or my future wife, to her flexibility. But first person will definitely have to be named Mikhail as well. Because
even if it's not a boy.
No. Of course, if it's a girl, then I'll have to rethink life. Mikhaila, maybe. Even though it's a bit strange. That's not really a common name for.
But that's the great thing about Florida.
Maybe, yeah.
You can call a kid whatever you want.
You're completely right.
Yeah, you could spell Mikhaila backwards.
Yes, or I can do what I think Elon Musk did.
Aliyaham. That's a nice name.
X.32.
Don't do it.
Don't do it?
Don't do it. That person has said that they disown Elon. Do you know that? They're like, that person's not my dad.
Interesting.
Yeah. So don't name your kid that.
Okay. I won't name my kid that.
Don't start a fight before they're born.
But the reason why I wanted Mikhail to be, if it's the son, for example, is because the way kind of Russian names work, and I think Eastern European names kind of have this trend as well, is you take the first name of your father and you just add Ovich to it. For example,
patronymic.
Yeah, patronymic, exactly.
Yeah.
So
are you Mikhail
Ivanovich?
Ivanovich. Okay.
Mikhailov.
So John.
So
Son of John, yeah.
Yeah, son of John.
Yeah.
So if I name my son Mikhail, he'll be Mikhail Mikhailovich Mikhailov.
Which is awesome. That's such a flex.
Exactly.
It's a hardcore flex. Okay. Let's talk about the election. Who'd you vote for?
Interesting question. I always try to avoid this question because, unfortunately, maybe I'm not sure if you witnessed this, but on campuses, for example, it's such a contentious point of who you voted for, even if it may be obvious or it may be not obvious who you voted for. I think I would identify myself as a Democrat, as a person who's liberal. I believe in universal healthcare, affordable housing, and paternal-maternal care for parents, for example. Unfortunately, I didn't think the Democratic candidates, either Biden or Kamala, kind of exemplified my true values in that. Maybe too much focus on identity politics as opposed to what I think is the necessity right now, which are those 3 things that I mentioned. But simultaneously, I understand the criticism against Trump. And I think even with hindsight and with retrospect, I can see the validity in that argument.
Which argument?
The fact that Trump was a bad choice. But I don't know if I would have voted for Kamala even with what I know now. Because again, I think the concept, just the concept of having A or B and you have to choose which one you hate least or less is a horrible, horrible structure. But unfortunately, that's the way we're put. And independent candidates never have a chance.
I'm really vibing with what you're saying. So something that I heard from a lot of friends who are liberal is that they didn't feel that the Democrats were actually a liberal option. That the Democrats were mostly just saying, we're not Trump.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
I definitely do. I think also I've seen comparisons of what we claim as left, or what the Democrats put themselves or identify themselves as. If you juxtapose that to what European parties look like, for example, our Democrats are still going to be quite right-leaning to some extent. And I'm very disappointed in that, because if we're talking about the beauty of America, which is freedom to choose, to voice who you are, there are not a lot of options for that.
And something that you've just said, which I really like, and I'd like to zoom out a little bit, is this idea of options.
Yep.
Right? We have in America functionally two options. How do you feel about those options?
Not good. I suppose you mean Republican or Democrat, right? I don't think that's good. I personally have a massive distaste for being put in almost like a false dilemma of choosing between whether you're a donkey or an elephant. I first off don't really know why they put those animals as their identity or symbolic nature, but I definitely wish there were other opportunities for people who are independent to actually stand up and run for president and actually have a chance. But unfortunately, the way it's structured is they're never going to get the same financial backing as Republican or Democrat. And I think if you take a comparative elections course or any political course in college that is centered on election, and you ask the question of why the system is constructed the way it is, it's because people who are put into a situation of, okay, do I want to vote for someone who I may slightly disagree with, which is maybe too left or too right compared to my perspective? Should I vote for them knowing that they will win if I will vote for them? Or should I vote for my person who is more closely aligned with me, even though I know they won't win? Would I take that risk of voting for the person I want more to potentially lose to a person I definitely don't want? Or do I vote for the more safer but not one that aligns with me option?
What do people say?
Well, unfortunately, it's the latter, where people are like, I'm going to vote for a more radical version of my thought process as opposed to a radical person winning who is completely against what I stand for. So unfortunately, we're pushed to these corners as opposed to the middle ground where I think 80% of Americans lay in, more moderate, people who want simple things, less unemployment, more safety, less pricing on
affordable healthcare,
if not
affordable
housing. Yeah. Again, paternal maternal care. I'm dumbfounded by the fact that our sophisticated democracy and our rich economy as Americans has no universal healthcare right now. I think that's something that I think I will be fighting for. I completely understand the criticism of we live in a capitalistic society, and therefore we want to make sure that the government doesn't ruin the healthcare system too much because there's not enough incentive to innovate potentially if it's just purely run by the government. But I don't think that we have a private, fully private, innovative healthcare system either. Because we have Medicaid and Medicare, for example. Again, very necessary things, but I think these are bandages to something that we're trying to get to. Like if we had a specific goal in life, or a thing that we're trying to stream for, which is everyone is healthy, everyone is clean, everyone is safe, a universal healthcare is inevitable. You have to reach there. There's no way you can privatize things without monopolies forming in a healthcare system. So
I'm very excited by what you're saying.
Of course. So, but the thing is, the criticism I always receive is this: but it's impossible. We'll never reach there. But and we need to privatize these things because again, the government won't officially do this. But my question is, okay, but you can apply the same logic of like it's not economically good right now to so many immoral things, like for example, slavery. People were saying slavery. It should sure we should try to make sure that everyone's equal, but this will hurt our economy right now. That argument is so invalid. I think the same thing for universal healthcare.
So this is something that I love about tech is I think in most parts of the world and in most parts of the economy even, people tend to say, oh, the status quo. That's the way it is.
Unfortunately.
It's entrenched. We can't change it. And in tech, the default is to say, why not?
Yeah.
Of course we can. Right? Like if we're not going to change it, who's going to change it? Right? Like it didn't start out this way. Somebody made it this way. We could make it some other way.
Of course.
And so it excites me to hear that sort of green grass, blue sky thinking that you're doing.
Of course. Yeah.
So we could go in 6 different directions, but I'm going to pick one.
Of course.
You said that an independent candidate couldn't win because they couldn't get funded at the same level. And first, I think let's talk about money in politics. What is the effect? How did we get where we are? And can you envision a future where money doesn't have this deleterious impact?
I want to say yes. I want to say that that's something I envision and hope for. But I think it's very difficult right now to try to see that as a near future reality. We are ingrained, first off, the value of money. We're ingrained to always stream for profit, to always utilize is a country good or well off. We use the GDP, for example. We use how well companies are doing in the economy. Things like these metrics. I think it's very difficult to distance ourselves from the value of money and success, unfortunately. And if independent candidates don't get that money right now, they're not able to convince people because they're not able to actually reach them, whether that be through social media, whether that be through actual canvassing. It's very difficult to do that. And unfortunately, I've spoken to so many amazing people who have run in either local elections and state elections or even federal elections. And they say, it's not even about the ideals that you stand for, but it's more so about how much money you have to push those things to make it sound good. And that's what really sucks about it. You can convince an average Joe that his views are completely wrong with enough money.
So you can dream about universal healthcare, but politics that isn't corrupted by money is too far.
I don't think it's too far. I think it's
too beautiful of a dream. We can't dream
at the current moment. I think it's too, obviously I can envision that maybe in 100 years or so.
After you're dead?
I don't think I'll be dead after 100 years.
So 123?
I'll be living probably.
I should have asked you that.
If not for my physical form, then with my legacy.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's a cop-out answer.
If I ask you, how is democracy going in the US? What do you say?
What democracy? I'm joking. It's an interesting question. How is democracy going? I think, I guess better than in other countries, or I can name...
Which other countries?
I suppose Russia or North Korea or China, for example. We're doing better than them, but if that's our point of reference...
That's a low bar.
I suppose.
How's it going?
How's it going with democracy?
Don't pull your punches. Just...
I don't think, not well, but because I personally think I don't understand how democracy can operate when we are so money driven and profit driven. Again, if we go back to the kind of the theory that I established last time, a little earlier, is specifically so many candidates have spoken to me and said, it's not about the ideals that you stand for, it's about how well you sell said ideal. You can't sell something without money. And if the more money you have, the more likely you can sell a bad idea over someone with no money with a good ideal. I genuinely think that's a very big issue right now.
And yet, when I asked you, could you envision a politics without money? You said it's too far-fetched.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It is too far-fetched. Well, right now it's too far-fetched because we're in a system where that money thing is so ingrained.
Because it seems like, and I don't disagree, in your mind, money and democracy are at odds.
Of course. I think they're definitely at odds. Maybe one may argue, a capitalist enthusiast would argue that money goes where the ideals go. Like if an ideal is really good, people will invest in it. But I don't think people are that selfless, at least right now.
So you say it's not going so well, that it's become more of a marketplace of dollars than a marketplace of ideas.
Yeah.
What could we do to work on it? How could we make it better?
My go-to answer: universal healthcare, affordable housing, paternal-maternal care. If we have those things fundamentally, then people, I think, would not be fighting to survive, and there'll be actually maybe whether it's a better education or better understanding of life, or just the fact that they're not scavenging for the next milk jug, for example, that they can afford, or to pay their rent. They will actually be able to enlighten themselves a little bit better, and then money-driven things would not be as much incentivized as ideals.
Do you think that when we have these discussions between friends or on social media, on TV, do you think that these are productive conversations that we have?
I think so. I think if we are having a conversation and we're only agreeing, I don't think that's productive.
But you think that the back and forth is that we're actually getting our point across, that we're able to find common ground, that we're talking about the right things, for example?
Maybe not as much as I would like to see. I think finding common ground more so, or making sure that we get points across is very necessary. One thing I don't like is whenever CNN or like Fox News has a guest over and it's just a bunch of yelling back and forth to the point, and it's very stupid because there's a large delay. So whenever someone's speaking, someone else is speaking over, it's a big mess.
Yeah.
One thing I wish they enforced, and specifically enforced with a lot of regulation, is, okay, now that he's done talking, summarize what he said. And if that person agrees with your summary, then you have an opportunity to speak. That's what I want to see. So, for example, if you and I were guests and we had a disagreement on like a very controversial topic, like, for example, abortion, if you said something about either pro-life or pro-choice, I would have the responsibility to summarize and tell you why your argument has merit. Then, and only then, when you agree to the concept of my summarization, I'm able to say my point.
I love that idea. Isn't there like Oxford rules of debate?
I think so. I think yeah.
And then I love the idea of the mics being switched off when it's not your turn. I think just as in the other discussion we were having, like these news organizations, these social media companies are trying to make money. And so they air the thing that is going to drive the most clicks and the most viewership and the most donations. And of course, a civil debate, a long form, friendly, collegial debate is not going to drive as many clicks as the shouting. That's what I worry about.
Of course. And I suppose that's, again, going back to the whole concept of profit-driven as opposed to actually productivity and democratic or ideals. Unfortunately, everything is driven by money, and unfortunately, conflict sells way more than healthy, just, safe discussions.
Do you think we should fight?
Well, if you want more views, yes. but I personally would not really want to entertain
I'll roll up the sleeves of my silk shirt and fight you. So, okay. In this atmosphere, what's giving you hope?
I think the biggest hope that I'm receiving is, again, the friends that, although I do tell them who I vote for example, or the choices I make, they don't automatically cut me off. And they want to speak with me and want to see my perspective, because that's exactly what I want to see. If someone says, I voted for insert candidate, and I disagree with that candidate, then I'm not going to be like, okay, you're completely blocked off. F you, your insert other.
And that happens?
Phobia. That happens all the time.
All the time. Okay.
There's so many people where you're sitting down, round table, doing something unrelated to politics, and then politics enter the chat, and because someone voted for X candidate or Y candidate, they are no longer affiliated or entertained in said circle, and they're blocked or shunned off.
In college?
In college, happens all the time. Well, maybe not as ubiquitously as maybe I'm building up, but it happens quite frequently, unfortunately.
And
maybe not in high school, probably even worse. I've
it's like when the conversation stops, like what happens after that?
We create our own echo chambers. That's why. Because now what you've done is instead of actually sitting down and being like, hey, let's see why we have these perspectives, you label them as an enemy of the state or an enemy of your interests. And therefore now we have to hate this population. We have to hate this population, which is the antithesis of what it means to be American, I would argue, or what it idealistically it means to be American. You know, that's I do not like that. And
this is a great moment to ask you.
Of course, please.
Mikhail, what is America?
Oof, okay. This question. All right. America is the ability or having the capability to not see eye to eye with something, but to understand why we don't see eye to eye, and exploring that opportunity and understanding the beauty of having diverse thought.
And that's America.
That's America. Well, at least I'd like to think that.
Yeah. And if I were to slightly tweak the question and say, what is the American dream? For you, what's the American dream?
My American dream is, obviously, if you asked me maybe 1,000 years previously, I'd be like, get a good family, make sure that I'm a good Christian boy that follows a nuclear family, that gets a piece of land.
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, 1,000 years ago. Like my ancestors came here, and I'd be like, spread Christianity, get land, and get rich. That's the American dream. Okay. But now, for me, the American dream is exactly what I said previously, which is making sure that civilization, whether that be us right now or beyond our borders or beyond our time period, people are in a just, safe, healthy environment. Reaching their potential as humans.
Beautiful. Yeah. How do we get there?
Universal health care, affordable housing, paternal, maternal leave.
I love it. Well, goodness. What's next for you?
So this summer I'll be in Brussels, Belgium, which is the unofficial headquarters of NATO and the EU. I'll try to take advantage of as many opportunities I have there, network, leverage connections I have with people who work in high entities. Then I want to apply for Rhodes Scholars, Marshall Scholars, and Schwarzman Scholars. That's either studying in the UK or in China, potentially international affairs. Coming back, I would love to do a Masters in Public Health from Johns Hopkins and a JD or a Masters of Law from Georgetown. And they have joint programs that I could potentially do.
Have you applied?
Not yet. I wanted to get a master's first before the Masters of International Affairs, before I get the Masters of Public Health, JD.
Okay.
So that's kind of the path I want to take.
Got it. Are you going to take any time off? You have any vacation planned?
I don't know. Maybe. This is my vacation, you know?
On the fourth floor of the library, in a hot study room, recording a podcast is your vacation.
This is my optimal milieu, I would say.
I love it. Thank you very much.
Of course.
This has been an amazing conversation.
Completely.
Now I feel like we're getting somewhere. Politically speaking, Mikhail doesn't like his options. On one hand, you have Democrats who are unwilling or unable to help people with urgent problems like affordable housing and healthcare. They don't even seem to have a platform other than "We're not Trump." On the other hand, you have Republicans who make unrealistic campaign promises and then, predictably, fail to deliver. Instead, they're funneling more and more money to billionaires. Over the past 20 years, when Americans have voted, they've voted for change. In fact, in 5 out of the last 5 presidential elections, the change candidate has won. But neither party will give it to them. Instead, they're giving us subtle variations on the status quo. People are saying, ouch, ouch, ouch. I can't afford healthcare. I need a place to live. And Republicans and Democrats are saying, have you tried more of the same thing? The same thing we've been doing for the last 20 years? I asked Mikhail whether he thought a third-party candidate could win. His answer was quick. No, they couldn't raise enough money. Because here in the United States of America, the candidate with the most money wins. You have to raise millions and millions of dollars even to compete. And I'm just wondering, how do we feel about that? Do we think a system like that is likely to produce good governance? Or is it just going to serve the interests of the rich, the people who can afford to buy elections? Mikhail mentioned that he's interested in going into public service, serving in the diplomatic corps, or even running for office. I hope he does. We need brilliant, hardworking candidates like him. In the meantime, we owe it to Mikhail to make our political system less corrupt, even just a little bit. Like, what if we imposed sensible limits on campaign spending? Made it so our government isn't run by lobbyists and special interests? Just thinking out loud. Okay, question. We've been at this now for 2 months. The podcast is 2 months old. That's 9 weeks and 9 episodes. So how are we doing? Of course, I've got a lot of feedback from myself. There are things I know I need to work on. But you've made it this far, so I thought I'd ask you. How could this podcast be better? What do you like about it? What annoys you? What have you seen elsewhere that we could try? Seriously, if you've got feedback, I want to hear it. Drop me a line at whatisamericapodcast@gmail.com. We're also celebrating a big first over here. The very first watch party for What is America. Remember Kaya Lewis, the 24-year-old who's working 3 jobs and also delivering delicious, healthy meals to people? Well, her family in South Dakota got together to watch her episode. In this photo, you can see 3 of the chefs who inspired her food journey: her mom, her grandpa, and her uncle. Thanks for tuning in, Kaya's family. Quick reminder about book club. The next one is coming up in 3 weeks on June 26th. The book we're reading is Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. It's about the decline in social capital in the United States since the 60s, basically the social connective tissue that holds the country together. I'm going to host a virtual meeting so we can talk about it live. If you'd like to join, shoot me an email. Once again, I'm whatisamericapodcast@gmail.com. Here's a bonus and special thanks to my cousin Walter Kleiss for pointing this out. If you don't have time to read the book, there's actually a wonderful Netflix documentary based on it. It's called Join or Die, and it's just 90 minutes long. So watch it and then join us, don't die, on June 26th. Here's a little sneak peek from the trailer.
Everything that reflects connections with other people are going down. How many times last year did you go to church?
Down.
How many times did you go to a dinner party?
Down.
How many times last year did you go to a club meeting? In barely a couple of decades, half all the civic infrastructure in America had simply vanished. It's equivalent to saying half of all the roads in America just disappeared.
Before we get out of here, I want to say thank you to 2 people who made my time in Florida so magical. Adam and Amy Grossman were basically my family while I was in Gainesville. They hosted me for dinner 3 times. They even took me to see their child's school play. Oh, and they introduced me to Mikhail. Adam and Amy, thank you for being my home away from home. Thanks also to Sally Rosenberg, who introduced me to Adam and Amy. It's a small world. If you're trying to stay connected and come along for the ride, the best thing you can do is subscribe to our newsletter. It's basically my shower thoughts, as well as links to the latest episode. Go to whatisamericapodcast.com and enter your email. If you're trying to follow me on social, I'm at What is America Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Fun fact, we recently published our very first TikTok video. Go check it out and let me know what you think. Finally, if you're one of the 34 million Americans who suffers from herpetophobia, the fear of dangerous reptiles, and you're sick of seeing gators on the podcast, you can find the audio edition on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and, say it with me, wherever you get your podcasts. Next week is another week, and tuck in your shirt, because we're talking to a teacher. That's right. Until recently, Dawn Morrison taught first and second graders in a Florida public school, and trust me, you're going to want to hear what she has to say. Until then, I'll leave you with the Gandhi quote that launched this whole crazy adventure. The act may seem small, but it's important that you do it. Thanks very much for tuning in. God bless America. Gator Chomp.